Here are 8 reasons you wouldn't last a week heading west across 1840s America. 1. The trail. It's 1849. You've sold your farm, packed a wagon, and joined the roughly 400,000 people who tried to walk 2,000 miles to Oregon and California between 1840 and 1869. And yes, walk. Most emigrants traveled on foot beside the wagon to spare the oxen. The route earned the nickname, the nation's longest graveyard. As many as 1 in 10 travelers died before reaching the coast, leaving 10 to 15 fresh graves for every single mile. Your wagon wants to kill you first. A loaded prairie schooner weighed over a ton, heavier than a grand piano on wheels, and it had no brakes worth the name. On a downhill grade, it could roll straight over the oxen and over you. Children had it worst. One diary records an 8-year-old who slipped off the wagon tongue and went under the wheels, dead on the spot. Water finished the job that gravity started. River crossings were one of the top killers, and a misjudged ford could sweep an entire wagon downstream, especially with a green or drunk driver at the reins. Then there were the guns. Most emigrants had never fired one, and they hauled absurd amounts of them anyway. The first recorded accidental gunshot death on the trail belonged, with grim comedy, to a man named John Shotwell. On May 13, 1841, he pulled his rifle out of the wagon muzzle first. It fired into his chest, and he took about an hour to die. Accidental shootings would go on to kill far more pioneers than any outlaw ever did. And the trail hadn't even started on the weather. 2. Heat and dust. Out on the open plains, there's no shade, no breeze, and no one to remind you to drink water while you cover 15 miles a day. The heat attacked your wagon too. Dry air shrank the wooden wheels until the iron tires rattled loose, so every night you soaked the wheels in a river to swell the wood back into shape. Then came the dust. Fine alkali powder coated everything, split your lips, and burned your eyes, and the alkali water sitting nearby could poison your oxen if they drank it. A bad stretch left you choking on grit for days with the nearest clean water a long dry march away. Plenty of people simply gave out. The land was gorgeous from a mile off and doing its best to mummify you up close. 3. Cannibal winter. The cold was worse, and the most famous proof is the Donner Party. In the spring of 1846, the Reed and Donner families rolled out of Springfield, Illinois, a group that would swell to about 87 people, chasing a so-called shortcut called the Hastings Cutoff. The shortcut was actually 125 miles longer and cost them weeks they did not have. By late October, they hit the Sierra Nevada, and an early storm slammed the pass shut behind them. They were trapped near a frozen lake, now called Donner Lake, for roughly 4 months. They ate their oxen, then they boiled and ate the hides, then they ate leather, bark, and worse. In December, 15 of the strongest strapped on snowshoes and set out for help, a group history named the Forlorn Hope. Only 7 made it out alive, and they survived by eating the ones who didn't. Back at the lake, the rest waited and starved. By the time rescuers arrived, 42 of the 87 were dead, and many survivors had stayed alive by eating the bodies of people they'd buried in the snow. The snow was so deep that when it melted, the tree stumps the party had cut stood over 10 feet tall. Freezing to death was the merciful option. Starving slowly while eyeing your dead friends was the Wild West's idea of a winter getaway. 4. Cholera country. Forget outlaws. The thing most likely to kill you out here was a glass of water. About 9 out of 10 trail deaths came from disease, and the deadliest was cholera. It spread through water fouled with human waste, and it moved fast. Healthy at breakfast, blue-skinned and shriveled by dinner, dead within a day. Some victims were gone within 12 hours of the first cramp. The cause was almost insultingly simple. Thousands of wagons camped at the same spots along the Platte River, year after year, and the waste of sick travelers washed straight into the water the next group drank. Nobody understood that yet, so they kept drinking. The gold rush turned it into an inferno, as tens of thousands stampeded west between 1849 and 1855. Cholera tore through the trail and the towns feeding it. In 1849 alone, St. Louis lost more than 4,000 people to cholera, around 1 in 15 of the entire city. And cholera brought friends. Dysentery, typhoid, and measles all rode along, picking off the weak. The good news is that a doctor might see you. The bad news is what passed for a doctor. 5. Quack doctors. Nobody had accepted that germs existed. Doctors had no clue cholera came from the water, so they didn't wash their hands on their tools between patients, which meant a house call could spread the very thing it was supposed to stop. Their treatments were a coin flip between useless and fatal. The fashion of the day was called heroic medicine. Bleed the patient, blister the skin, and purge the guts until something happened. The star purgative was calomel, a mercury compound handed out for nearly everything. Take enough and your gums bled, your teeth loosened, and your jaw could rot away. Mercury was also the go-to fix for syphilis, which is where the old line came from: one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Skipping the doctor was no safer. Patent medicines were sold as miracle cures and quietly spiked with opium, alcohol, and even cocaine, then spooned into grown adults and crying babies alike. A frontier medicine cabinet had about the same safety rating as an energy drink invented by a man with no eyebrows. 6. Snakebite. The plains were crawling with rattlesnakes, from the western diamondback to the sidewinder, and a bite from a big one could drop a grown adult. Here's the problem. The first working antivenom on Earth wasn't created until a French scientist brewed an anti-cobra serum in 1895, and the United States didn't make its own until 1927. On the 1849 trail, you had nothing. Your options were a menu of things that flat out did not work. Slice the wound open and suck out the venom. Pour in whiskey. Splash on ammonia. Or chew a plant root and pray. It got worse when the snake missed. Penicillin wasn't usable until the 1940s, so even a clean, venom-free bite could fester, turn septic, and kill you weeks later. The venom was almost a bonus. A torn open ankle and a little time were plenty. You dodged the snakes. Now you need to eat, which means you need a job. 7. Hard labor. Every job out west was quietly trying to kill you, and the railroad led the league. To blast the transcontinental line through the Sierra Nevada between 1865 and 1869, the Central Pacific hired somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 Chinese workers, who made up about 90% of the crew. In the Summit Tunnel, they packed nitroglycerin, an explosive so twitchy it killed men while they were still mixing it. In the winter of 1866 to 1867, snowdrifts piled 40 feet high, taller than a 4-story building, and avalanches swallowed entire work camps whole. Around 1,000 to 1,200 workers died, and many were shipped home to China as boxes of bones. Mining was no kinder. Cave-ins, black powder, and unstable dynamite killed men by the shaftful, and the ones who lived breathed rock dust for years until their lungs turned to stone with silicosis. Even the cowboy life that Hollywood sells you meant 15-hour days in the saddle, drownings at river crossings, and getting trampled flat by your own spooked cattle. And if the work didn't get you, the locals might. 8. Frontier War. The law out here was thin and broke. Plenty of cattle towns like Dodge City and Tombstone actually banned carrying guns inside town limits. But with barely any money for lawmen, that rule was more of a polite request. Into that gap rode the outlaws. Jesse James, the Dalton Gang, and Butch Cassidy robbed banks, trains, and travelers, and turned themselves into legends. Hollywood sells you the high noon quick draw duel in the dusty street. Out here, the killing was mostly ambushes, robberies gone wrong, mob lynchings, and slow-burning range wars over land and cattle. And here's the twist on the campfire story. Across the entire trail era from 1840 to 1860, fewer than 400 immigrants were killed by Native Americans. Your own wagon and your own drinking water were far deadlier than any raiding party. The real bloodshed came from the war over the land itself. Across the more than 40 wars the United States government fought against Native nations, the Census Bureau counted in 1894 about 19,000 settlers and roughly 30,000 Native people killed, and it admitted the true Native toll was probably far higher. You weren't settling a frontier, so you were moving on to an active battlefield and calling it a fresh start. So add it up. A wagon heavier than a piano with no brakes, water that kills you in a day, doctors dosing you with mercury, a winter that turned your friends into food, and a frontier that doubled as a war zone. Life expectancy at birth in this era was only about 40 years, and it's that low mostly because so many children never reached 5. As many as 1 in 10 who set out west never arrived at all. You weren't chasing a new life. You were betting the one you already had. So tell me, do you think you'd survive? Drop your answer below and subscribe if you're feeling brave.